Scott.
Let me start by telling you something about what the School of Natural Sciences doesn't do. Doesn't do chemistry, doesn't do geology, meteorology, oceanography, ecology, zoology, botany. Within physics, we don't do the largest discipline in physics, condensed matter physics. We don't do nuclear physics, we don't do atomic or molecular physics. We don't have laboratories, we don't conduct experiments at national, international laboratories, and we typically don't work in large collaborations. What the Institute's efforts in natural science do try to do is to understand on the most fundamental level the smallest, the largest, and the most complicated aspects of nature. Those three directions correspond to the three research foci of the school: physics, astrophysics, and systems biology. The physics activities are focused on understanding the smallest aspects of nature, the fundamental particles, which everything is composed, and the forces acting between them. In this sense, the physics activity is very much in the tradition of the reductionist approach that's dominated physics and much of science for the last several centuries. This point of view was encapsulated in a famous quote made by one of our former members, Paul Dirac, who you saw in one of Robert's pictures carrying an axe over his shoulder to go off and chop trees in the Institute woods. Almost a century ago, Dirac said about chemistry, the fundamental laws necessary for the mathematical treatment of the whole of chemistry are completely known, and the difficulty lies only in the fact that application of these laws leads to equations that are too complex to be solved. So much for chemistry. The astrophysics efforts are focused on the largest aspects of nature, on scales from the solar system to exoplanets to cosmology. I want to distinguish astrophysics from astronomy. Astronomy as a discipline has been around for millennia. It's sometimes called the world's second oldest profession. But the central tenet of astrophysics is much more recent. It's that the laws of physics that apply throughout the cosmos are the same laws that can be explored in the laboratory. That belief was certainly not held by most civilizations, and its consequences have really only been seriously explored in the 20th century. And in the 21st century, the logic of this tenet is being reversed. Rather than using the laws discovered in the laboratory to explain phenomena seen in the cosmos, we're using phenomena seen in the cosmos to explore the laws of physics in conditions that are too extreme to be reproduced in the laboratory. Biology activities in the school are focused on the most complicated aspect of nature, living systems, in particular on the interface between physics and mathematics and molecular biology. The members in biology are using the tools of physics and computer science to analyze the collective behavior of biological systems on all scales, from genomes to cells to organisms to populations. Many of the members come here after completing their graduate work in physics or computer science or mathematics, and then are trained in the important problems and techniques in biology after they arrive. There are 7 faculty in the school, but many of us feel that what really distinguishes us from university departments in the natural sciences is the members. We typically receive 500 to 600 applications for membership each year and accept about 20. Most, but not all of the members come as postdoctoral fellows, staying for 3 to 5 years, and we feel that the stage in the careers that they spend at the Institute is important for 3 main reasons. One is to develop their ability to do independent research without supervision from a thesis advisor, and this is often their first chance to do so. One is to expand their horizons into new research areas before all of the pressures associated with the junior faculty position set in. And the third is to meet with and learn from a large cohort of other talented postdoctoral fellows who are going to be their colleagues in different countries for the rest of their careers. I should also mention that our school is host to the Institute's high-performance computing facilities. We have our own large computing cluster and shared access to an even larger set of machines at Princeton University. All of those facilities are available to members from any school, and so if you have a need for high-performance computing, we can easily satisfy it. Finally, I'd like to mention the school's most important resource, which is Freeman Dyson. Robert already mentioned the book on the history of the Institute by Dyson's son, George. We celebrated Freeman's 90th birthday several years ago. He's the Institute's most exceptional polymath. He made his reputation in mathematical physics, but he's contributed to our understanding of astrophysics, the prisoner's dilemma, nuclear disarmament, climate change, interstellar travel, extraterrestrial intelligence, and many other subjects. He's responsible for the Dyson sphere, the Dyson operator, the Dyson series, the Schwinger-Dyson equation, the Dyson conjecture, the Dyson number, the Dyson tree, and the Dyson transform. He's written a dozen books. He still contributes regularly to the New York Review of Books. So if you have a chance to talk to Freeman at any time during your stay, you really should do so. You never know what will happen. Some years ago, I was trying to learn about a particular arcane random process, and I mentioned it to Freeman, and he said, yes, I know about this. It's a good model for the bus system in Cuernavaca. Okay. Next is Sabine.
To introduce the School of Historical Studies, its history, and its workings, let me begin with a brief excerpt from a memorandum submitted in April 18, 1941, by the Institute's Faculty of Humanistic Studies to the director. I quote, "In these days of crumbling values, it falls to the lot of humanists to save learning and scholarship from extinction, and it is the privilege of institutes like ours to become the asylum, particularly for those studies which a period of upheaval considers of no use whatsoever. It may be the destiny of our institute and of similar centers to rescue what they can of a civilization about to suffer shipwreck. If the lights are not to go out for good and all, it will be because of a small handful of scholars here and elsewhere who are devoted to learning for its own sake. This is a point of view which is not popular just now. It is, however, of the utmost importance that it be understood and appreciated by those who have the future of the Institute in their hands." End of quote. Well, those dramatic words were uttered against the background of the Nazi regime in Germany during its 8th year, and most of continental Europe having been invaded by either German, Soviet, or Italian troops. The core message of the faculty statement has still some bearing in our days. The Institute, as it has been envisioned, was without precedent in the US at the time. It was created by its founders for the sole and single purpose of advancing the boundaries of human knowledge. And its intriguing mixture of permanent members of the faculty and members who join us for a limited period of time, be it a term, a year, or even beyond that, is up until today unique in the academic landscape. Neither university nor a pure research institute, but something in between. The School of Humanistic Studies, as it was initially titled, began its work in October 1936. Third in a line after the School of Mathematics and the School of Economics and Politics, those being the three schools that had been envisioned from the very beginning. From the outset, the School of Humanistic Studies covered four major disciplines: history of art, classical archaeology, ancient history and epigraphy, and Near Eastern studies. A combination that was meant at the time to fill the needs of Princeton University's Department of Art and Archaeology and to complement the latter's faculty. As was the case with the School of Mathematics, the political circumstances in Europe, especially Germany, facilitated the appointment of first-rate scholars within a short period of time. Over the decades, the school structure was occasionally modified. Some fields were discontinued, while other disciplines were added. An important structural change occurred in 1949 when the School of Economics and Politics and the School of Humanistic Studies merged to form a new school, the School of Historical Studies. And while art history and ancient history were continuously represented by a permanent faculty member, this was not the case with archaeology and Near Eastern studies. Moreover, over the course of time, as the working relations between Princeton University and the Institute grew less tight than had been the case during the founding years, other fields were added that were not previously in the faculty's purview, such as medieval history, modern history, international relations, history of science, occasionally philosophy, classical as well as modern, East Asian studies, and an entirely new focus in the field of Near Eastern studies since the 1970s. In addition to this, the school entertains a small program in musicology, though without a permanent faculty member. Today, the school has 8 permanent positions covering the following fields: art history, ancient history, medieval history, modern history, international relations, history of science, East Asian studies, and Near Eastern and Islamic studies, with 2 vacancies at present. The cohesion of the School of Historical Studies takes a different form than that of other schools. We do not operate, for example, on the basis of annual themes, but select our members exclusively on the basis of the quality of their research proposal and on their earlier scholarly work. And the only regular meetings of the entire school are the lunch colloquia on Thursdays. And yet, it is the informal and spontaneous exchange among faculty and members representing the different fields which has been proven to be so extremely fruitful over the years and created countless long-term collaborations among scholars who met at the IAS that would have been most unlikely to occur under different, more conventional circumstances. The members in our school are free to bond with any of the disciplinary groups, and many of our members participate in more than one group. They are also encouraged to look beyond the boundaries of their own school. Near Eastern Studies, for example, is a field that is always represented by members by both schools, historical studies as well as social science. Moreover, it is a discipline that also attracts scholars to the schools of mathematics and natural sciences in fields such as historical mathematics in Muslim societies or mathematical astronomy among Near Eastern societies. There are other formats established as well as spontaneous ones which invite and enable exchanges between virtually all schools. These include the after-hours conversations, which have been running for a couple of years now, with much success, as well as private, mostly spontaneous initiatives like the History Working Group, which earlier this year produced the wonderful exhibition A Scholar's Paradise in the World, or the regular IAS Ladies' Lunches. Scholarship needs support, financial, practical, and technical. We all owe the ability to work in this paradise of scholars to the generosity of our trustees and donors who over the decades believed in and supported the mission of the Institute and who trust in the work we are doing, who trust us. Equally indispensable for the success of our work is the Institute staff, which is absolutely fantastic. The utter dedication of virtually any IAS staff member, whether they work in the libraries or the archives, in IT, in maintenance, in the dining hall, or in the central administration, to the mission of the Institute and the tremendous support they render to the scholars who work here is just amazing. And I'm sure you will sense this again and again. Since we are a relatively small institution, and since virtually everyone working here shares the deep commitment to the Institute's mission and its scholarship, the bonds between staff and faculty are much closer than is typically the case in other larger academic institutions. We all welcome you to be part of this wonderful community of people who, in their different functions, all strive for the same goal: to put to fruition the ideals of the Institute founders, to advance the boundaries of human knowledge for the betterment of humankind. Thank you.
used to. Okay, so I'm from the School of Mathematics. You heard about the history of the School of Mathematics. It was the first school, and we are the biggest school. We have about 60 members. That's quite a lot each year. And we have 7 regular faculty and 5 emeriti, and the emeriti are all extremely active and very approachable. And you will see them in seminars and in the dining hall, where we occupy a lot of, a few tables there, which are probably best mixed around a bit as the year goes up, so that there's more interactions. Of course, mathematics is a big field, so with just a few faculty, and even with 60 members, it's hard to cover all the exciting areas. And one thing we have, which I want to explain first, is a special program each year, which seems unique to our school. So we run a special program in an area which has seen some recent advance, maybe a year or two before. We have to plan in advance. And this involves bringing usually someone from the outside who's an expert in the area in which they might have been in advance. And that person is treated as a regular faculty and is the distinguished visiting professor, or DVP, and spends a year here. And this year the DVP is Akshay Venkatesh from Stanford University. The topic of the special year is locally symmetric spaces, analytic and topological aspects. That sounds quite technical. It's a study of geometric spaces of constant curvature, which are at the heart of many of the modern fields of automorphic forms, representation theory, and number theory, all which have a tremendous tradition and representation in this institution through the many previous members and faculty. It has many applications, very striking ones, and these tools were pioneered by many of our previous faculty. The analytic side, for example, by Atlas Selberg, and will be one of the themes of the special year. The activity on the special year happens on Tuesdays, a very active day in which there will be introductory talks and more advanced talks. This is geared mainly to the mathematical members. So much for this special year. About 1/3 of the 60 members are involved in this program directly, but mathematics is a much smaller field than many people think, and so people outside of the special year, and when we choose the members, we often keep this in mind, do interact with the special program which forms the main core. However, the other 2/3 are people representing many other aspects of mathematics that at least we deem exciting areas, and they span from analysis, partial differential equations, number theory, topology, geometry, algebra, mathematical physics. We have a big group in computational complexity and also in the foundations of computation. We have regular seminars. It's very active in Simone Hall here, as you will see. And many of these seminars are joint with other mathematics departments around in the area, and most notably Princeton University. You'll find advertisements of the seminars both here and at Princeton, and you should look at Princeton because there are often very interesting lecture series and seminars that might not be advertised here. Many of our members collaborate with other mathematicians in the area, and the result is a mathematical community which is very vibrant, and we like to think that even though we are relatively small, just being Princeton, isolated, that we feel, it feels like it could be Paris or Cambridge, at least mathematically. There is a colloquium, the math colloquium, that's on Mondays. That's supposed to be for a general audience, and everybody's encouraged to attend that. That's supposed to be explaining something more general rather than being a technical seminar. The environment, as has been described, I think, by Robert and others, is one where you are encouraged to participate, but as much or as little as you want. In other words, you're here to achieve your goals, and different people do it in different ways. So if you want to sit in your office or go into the woods to think and be not interact with people, that's fine. If you like to interact, then there's ample opportunity to interact. So it's really, the setup of the Institute is, I think, very good for you to achieve your goals, and somehow if you don't achieve them, you only have yourself to blame. We also have some public or named lectures named after Weil and Morse, two previous faculty here. You saw Herman Weil was the first member and certainly set the math school here in the right direction. So we have these lectures, each a lecture series once a year, and in fact the Weil lectures will be given in 2 weeks, and they are given this year, and they'll be given by Sergio Kleinerman from the university, in fact, and the topic of his lectures are the mathematical theory of black holes, so it might be of interest to people in the physics department, physics school as well, natural sciences school. One of the things that we do, I think that's proven over the years to be most successful, is we start out, beginning tomorrow, with an intense bang where we take all the new, so amongst the 60 that we take each year, a good number are new PhDs. And many people don't know what they do, and we've read their files, so we know what they did in their thesis, but they don't know each other. And what we do is we have, as I say, a very intense 2 weeks of short presentations by only young PhDs. This is the most attended lectures of the year. Everybody comes to that, from the emeriti to the faculty. And it's an opportunity to get to know what they do, and more importantly, it's an opportunity for you to get to know each other. Many collaborations start there. I know of collaborations that started there that led to Fields medals right there in the second meeting of one of these. So it's an opportunity, and it's very exhausting. It's every afternoon for 2 weeks, but it's very rewarding. So I urge you all to come to that, at least those in the math school. If you're in some other schools, you might come just to see sociologically what they do on the blackboard. All right, that's all I have to say. Let me welcome you, and I will take any questions once we are invited to answer.
Speaking of sociology, I will present the School of Social Science, which is the youngest of the 4 schools. It was created in 1973 by Carl Kaysen, who was the director at the time, and Clifford Geertz. It's also the smallest. We have 4 permanent faculty. At the moment, we're on a search for 3 of the positions, so I let you do the arithmetic. And since the participation in the 12 committees that the Institute has is a rotating activity, I'm a member of all of them. But we are lucky enough to have the presence of 2 very active emeriti, John Scott, the historian, and Michael Walzer, political theorist. We also have this year the pleasure to have with us visiting Professor George Steinmetz from the University of Michigan. He's a sociologist. And of course we have members, 25. We have visitors, 10. And they are from the 6 continents. And we have also a staff about whom I could make the same compliments as Sabine did earlier. We are also, in terms of disciplines, the most diverse school, since we have sociology, anthropology, history, law, political science, economics, philosophy, literary studies. Perhaps I forget some. Myself, I'm an anthropologist and a sociologist. Each year we have a theme, although a little less than half of our members are not in this theme. 2 years ago, the theme was borders and boundaries, so that gave us a chance to be thinking about immigration and racial issues. Last year, the theme was law and the social science, and we dealt with topics such as mass incarceration, death penalty, but also Islamic law. And this year, the theme is the social sciences in a changing world, and that brings us to work on epistemological question, which can be of interest for many of you, even from the other schools, like, for example, the question of causation, to discuss the debate between positivism and critical realism, or looking at how culture, the concept of culture, is redefined through cognitive science and neuroscience. And we have historians, sociologists, anthropologists, philosophers thinking about the social sciences and trying to answer questions such as how distinct are the social sciences in Poland or in Japan? What is the internationalization of the social sciences today, in particular in Europe? What is creativity and where did this idea come from? What is the role of philanthropy in the making of sciences in general and social sciences in particular? Some of these topics will be discussed and presented in the after-hours conversation, to whom everyone is invited, and also in our Monday seminar. And again, that's an open meeting, and this is certainly one of the wonderful opportunities at the Institute for Advanced Study to be able to hear from people from other fields and other disciplines. Briefly, several other activities are worth mentioning. We have international workshops. Last week we had one that was titled Worlds and Words, and subtitled A Lexicon for Dark Times, where we try to explore the contemporary world through words. We have a public policy lecture in the spring, and last year Thomas Piketty opened this new series. We have a film series that we do with Marcia Tucker from the library, and this year we may screen 6 films from the 6 countries whose citizens are under a ban today. And you're all invited to these films and documentaries. We have the summer program in social science that was mentioned earlier, which is the result of the observation that we did when a few years ago that there was an underrepresentation of several regions in the world: Latin America, Africa, Middle East. And so we have this special program which we started 3 years ago. And it's now a 2-year program, the first year being in Princeton here at the Institute, and the second being in part in Bogota, in part in Johannesburg. And this is a program where we bring approximately 20 early career scholars from the 3 regions that I mentioned earlier. And finally, we have we've had in the last 3 years a small program for scholars at risk. So we had successively a sociologist from Cameroon, a legal scholar from China, and this year an economist from Azerbaijan. But I should say that our concern about scholars at risk in the world is not limited to those who are labeled as such by institution, but also about colleagues, some of them being here from Turkey, from Hong Kong, from India and other places in the world, whose work has very strong interference with a complicated political situation. This is a concern we have, And this is also something that makes us understand how privileged we are at the Institute for Advanced Study. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. I'm sure there are those of you who are eager to ask questions, so I won't keep you locked here too. I just want to start the discussion perhaps by asking a few of you something that perhaps you can reflect upon from your own perspective. Is that, as it said, there are many things you can do, but only a few things only you can do. So can you say a few words about what you see as the role of the school and the institute in your field that's really kind of complementary or different from what's happening at universities or other academic institutions? And Scott, can you start? Please take the mic.
Well, I think that the real function of the Institute in our school has been to try to become a nexus where a large number of people just past their PhDs come together. It's distinct from what happens at universities because all of the members here have complete freedom to work on whatever subjects they want, and because the ratio of the number of faculty to the number of PhDs is almost the inverse of what it is in a typical university department. And although we encourage the postdocs to work with us and to talk to us, it has to be that the primary intellectual stimulation that they receive comes from their own cohort.
Do you see this in some sense, if you follow their careers, that this has really changed the careers of young scientists, this very different environment?
Well, there's a question of cause and effect. Of course, we try to select people who we think will profit from an environment like this. So it's difficult to tell if they end up being particularly independent and interested in moving between fields because they've been at the Institute, or we picked them because they were likely to be that way in the first place.
Didier, I just want to ask you, because Scott started by telling which branches of natural sciences he did not do. And I think one thing I find, by the way, very striking in the Institute, that in some sense we have kind of organic practices, but how even they differ across the 4 schools, which I think is probably a very good thing, because they have a different culture. But I mean, the way you're describing the Institute was much more your school as being all of the above. So how does that relate to what you see, for instance, in the university world?
So first of all, as you've noticed, although we are the smallest school, we cover all fields. But more seriously, there are many choices that we made in the past, and we will continue to make, about what will not be our priority with, of course, 4 positions. But in terms of what is different from university, and I will take it mostly from what we hear from the members at the end of the year. So one thing that is common to, I think, all schools is the liberty that you have to choose topics, but also of your time, simply. But the other, which is maybe a little more specific to our school, although maybe not, is, as I said before, the fact that we have 10 disciplines that are represented. This is for many a unique occasion, which is so different from being in a department in your discipline. And that, plus the fact of having scholars from different countries, gives also a global dimension to the kind of reflection that can be shared among members.
I guess your school, as you said, not only covers many fields, but if you compare it to the university kind of architecture, it also covers many different departments, from economics to social science to etc. Yeah, Sabine, I want to ask you about the School of Historical Studies, because in some sense your school is kind of different in the sense that we heard that both in math and social science there is a theme each year, whereas from part And Scott indicated in some sense there are some kind of almost perennial themes. The School of Historical Studies seem to be in some sense with very little structure, or are the interests of the faculty, so to say, the poles that attract academic activities?
No.
It's on.
In my experience, it's one of the advantages that we don't have annual themes, but accept members simply by merit on the basis of their proposals, and that we as faculty are also extremely diverse. Because this is really creating an atmosphere that people working in the humanities, in historical studies in the widest sense, can be exposed over the course of this year to a wide range of humanistic disciplines that would be impossible to encounter in any university, in any department. And it's really mind-boggling to see what kind of collaborations occur among the members in the over the course of the year. I'm just thinking of the example of last year. We had a couple of medievalists and Islamicists who all happened to be interested in astrology in social settings at the different times, completely different times. So even if we would have been thinking of a theme, we would never have thought that these people have something in common to talk about. And at the end of the year, they formulated a joint research project, which crosses the US, Germany, and a member from France. You couldn't possibly think about that.
I know it is a theme. I think certainly the institute is perfectly suited to have cross or interdisciplinary research. But it's I like to say it happens, but it happens at the natural rate, right? It's because it's not because of design. Do you agree with that, or?
Yes, absolutely, and I think as we saw from the founding days, it's really the people who make the place, and it's also the people who dictate or who form whatever is being done. And I think one of my favorite examples in that respect is Otto Neugebauer, who had been here for a couple of decades, working in mathematical astronomy from a historical point of view, who had been, over the years, he had been a long-term member. He had been member both, co-affiliated in this School of Historical Studies, School of Mathematics, and School of Natural Sciences. And this is something that can only happen here. This kind of person could never have functioned in any university environment.
Yes. Peter, I want to ask you about, without any kind of false modesty, but I often feel that if I talk to mathematicians and ask them about the Institute for Advanced Study, they get a certain glow or something. It has a specific role in worldwide mathematics. I would say almost kind of a symbolic role. Do you recognize that?
Well, as your historical outline at the beginning showed, this was something very unique in the formation of the math school here, with people like Weil, Siegel, Gödel, von Neumann. That kind of series of appointments sets the bar at a level that will maybe never be reproduced anywhere. But we do have this tradition which we glow in and hope to try maintain some of that, and I think we do succeed. In terms of your first question, what's very different at the institute to a university, at least a big university like Princeton or anything, institution like that, is mathematicians in an institution like that will be in their department and interact only with each other. The only time they will talk to anybody outside of the math department would be if they're on some committee, and then they would be quite annoyed to be on that committee. And so it's very different here, since I'm at the university and here. I'm on the same platform here as a historian and a social scientist and a physicist, and in the dining hall and the interactions, you interact with people who you wouldn't normally act in another environment. That's just a social thing that occasionally leads to collaborations with these. You mentioned someone in math and in
history. Where things are very unusual here is take von Neumann, who was brought to the Institute probably by Weil as a pure mathematician in something called von Neumann algebras, some of the most pure and abstract mathematical theory. His interest then turned to computation. And when, and so he built a computer here, as you explained earlier. There are very few places in the world where that could take place and spontaneously, and he can, as bringing members, bring people to interact with him in that way. So if there's something exciting happening, we can respond quite quickly to that, which a university can't. Another thing is by having this special program that I mentioned at the beginning, which is by design and which does take 1/3 of our program, we can have an intense year period, or whatever the length of the term is, 2 terms are, period with all the experts. We're lucky to be able to bring most of the experts, looking at the ramifications and implications of some advance. This happens around the world with conferences in departments and conferences in conference centers, but it doesn't happen at this kind of pace where you can think slowly over a year and delve much more deeply into the developments. On the other hand, designing is not always a good idea, and so the 2/3, which is free and acts like the history, is absolutely critical, and many of the best collaborations happen that way. I just wanted to add to what I said at the beginning, this intense first period that I was mentioning earlier, it takes place at the beginning. We used to have it at the end, and then people would say, gee, you do that, why didn't you tell me? I'm now leaving. So we evolved, and we now have that as the very first thing, and it seems to work very well, and I encourage the other schools to try emulate that.
Thank you. We can always learn from each other. I think it's good to kind of open the floor for discussion. Any remarks, questions, whether it's about history, present, and the future? Any questions? Otherwise, I will ask more. Yes, just wait for the mic.
Okay, my name is Brechtje van Ekelen. I'm in the social science section. As I arrived here and have been here for 3 weeks, my heart goes out to what you were talking about, the scholars at risk, but also to a lot of other teachers, professors, both in the United States, Europe, who work under immense pressures. And I'm extremely inspired here and privileged. And at the same time, I think about how can some of this abundance of freedom, uselessness, etc., travel to these other places that are under such duress. And I'm thinking, on the one hand, I know this is just simply a matter of privilege and finance. But at the same time, I think what, at the very least in Europe, where there's so much accountability thinking going on at the moment, I think something of this spirit of freedom and maybe input instead of output could perhaps travel from this, super ivory tower, woodsy environment to these other places. And I wonder what you think, could spill over.
I will ask my colleagues in a moment. I think it's a terrific point, and it's something that we hear many times from members, because people have a wonderful time. Now, all of you will be added to our kind of alumni base, which are more than 5,000 currently, 5,000 members who, in all different roles, I think they still think fondly back about the Institute, but we hope that they can bring some of their experience and ideas with them. I will ask my colleagues in a moment, but one thing I really liked at the point that Peter, I think, I talked to a mathematician, and often asked, said, the mathematician, she said, well, I love my time at the Institute, and I really enjoy every time I go back. But actually, even if I'm not going back, just thinking about that it exists, And that there is this place dedicated to my field and taking it so serious is kind of a moral encouragement. But I'm just looking around. Any perhaps more concrete ideas or things that happened in the past? I think we do know, by the way, that many people who went out created equivalents of IASs around the world, or created free spaces, or somehow took up the fight to eliminate bureaucracy and create more freedom. But are there any kind of inspiring stories or ideas you want to share? DJ?
Well, it is certainly a difficult task for a small institution as we are, and that would be very pretentious to think that, considering the scope and size of the problem that you're referring to, that we could have a major impact. Still, this is something that we've been, and I think we all here have been concerned about. John Scott last year organized a 2-day workshop with on the theme of academic freedom, and has been trying with people belonging to institutions and academic places to build a network on these issues. So far it's very US centered, but it could go further than that. I mentioned earlier the summer program in social science. I think the idea was also of the same kind, to realize that a few years ago, around 30 to 35% of the scholars that we had in our school were from non-US institutions. Today it's about 2/3. But the summer program is also adding a different model, much shorter, part here, part in other countries. But it is certainly something that pertains to a broader mobilization.
Any further remarks, Scott?
Well, I think there has been a lot of discussion among the faculty on precisely this issue. And I don't think we have any magic answers, but one of the tensions that occurs is the tension between trying to help scholars in many countries who are in difficult or dangerous positions, and the other side of the institute, which is that we're trying to restrict ourselves to fostering intellectual activity of the highest possible quality, and those two don't always mesh. I think Robert referred to that earlier. In the 1930s. You know, it was if Einstein and Gödel and Weil and Noether were refugees, it wasn't that hard to figure out what you should do about it. And I think that's less true these days, and the people who are usually in the most danger are not of the kind of intellectual caliber that there was in the 30s. And I don't know the answer to that, but that's one ingredient that I think we and everybody else has to try to understand how to answer.
Other questions? Well, I think this is just the Institute for Advanced Study 101, I think. So I hope we have, I think, many more opportunities this year, and for some of you perhaps the coming years to discuss. Just want to tell you that in the afternoon there will be an information session close to the common room of Fould Hall, and then we have the reception in the afternoon. So thank you very much for attending this meeting. Thank you.